on because I have you in a scene on where I can see all of you for voting purposes. So I'd appreciate if you put your camera on. We acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are thankful for the opportunity to share the land with them. Are there any announcements, acknowledgements, or recognitions this morning? No one's raising their hand, so I'm presuming we'll move on. This is normally the time we allow for public input. And of course, this morning, because we are online, we won't have that opportunity. But for those people that may watch this video after we're finished, then I encourage people to attend our meetings. And we allow at all our meetings, both finance, policy, and strategy, and our council meetings, 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting for public input, which allows people to bring issues forward or to comment on agenda items that will be presented to council during the meeting. And we allow that opportunity for people to participate in the activities of municipal council. Are there any changes to the agenda? I just want to check with Tom. We are going to change take off item 11.4.1, am I correct?
Yes, Mayor, we'd like to remove the pre-budget approval of the privacy and data protection shared service. And we'll be bringing that back either in about 2 weeks, or we'll just do it as part of the budget.
Okay, thank you. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda with the deletion of that item? Moved by Councillor Brooks, seconded by Councillor Hubley. All in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. We have minutes from the February 10th meeting, a regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions or changes in those minutes? I'm seeing no one indicate any, so we'll approve those as circulated. There was a special council meeting on February 12th, and those minutes have been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll approve those minutes as circulated. I don't think there's any business arising from the minutes. We have no awarding of tenders, so we will move to presentations. And today we are pleased to have with us the Lunenburg Wheels representatives Eric Hustevend and a former councillor, and Darren, all of a sudden Darren Lance, I'm sorry, with us to give us a presentation on Lunenburg Wheels. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Greetings, Your Worship and councillors. I'm, as the mayor said, Eric Hustevend. I'm the secretary of the board of Lunenburg County Wheels. And my tag team partner here is Darren Lance, our operations manager. We appreciate the opportunity to come and update you about our service. Before Darren guides you through the nuts and bolts, I want to say thank you to the council for several years now, as we went through a major transition, has provided material and moral support. You helped us in the early time of our transition. And I'll just go back to square one. Lunenburg County Wheels grew out of Senior Wheels, which was a volunteer one vehicle operation that provided transportation to seniors and persons with disabilities in Bridgewater and also in District of Lunenburg communities, six kilometers outside town. And so starting about 3 years ago, the service transitioned into what is now a service that serves all District of Lunenburg communities, the towns of Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and Mahone Bay. There's six vehicles. We have a full-time professional manager, full-time dispatcher, and we'll soon have a part-time administrative assistant. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. In any case, thank you very much to this council. Early on provided a minivan for us to use. That was our first vehicle beyond the original bus. Helped us keep long distance fares low, helped us secure bike racks for 2 of our vans, and most significantly, have made us a line item in your budget. So this support has helped us live up to our slogan, which is connecting people and communities. And we see the difference every day in what changes or what opportunities the service provides. Some examples are making work possible for a young person, providing access to exercise classes for a senior with respiratory challenges, connecting couples when one partner is on long-term care, and enabling family bicycle outings. So this is the second anniversary of our expansion to all District of Lunenburg communities. And we're marking it with a thank you campaign that includes a public reception for our funders, donors, and supporters, noontime Thursday, March 19th at Bridgewater Mall. I'm pleased the mayor has accepted to come and represent your council at that event. It's a public event, so you're all very welcome as well. We just went through a strategic planning exercise, plans for expanding service to evenings and Saturdays has evolved as an objective, and also for charters. These ambitions go hand in hand with ambitions to expand our private sector funding sources. Our current expenses still exceed our current income. As most board members who went through the transition to LC Wheels have been leaving the board, we continue to look for new board members, with the current need being a treasurer with accounting experience. And I want to say thank you at this point to Councillor Oikel, who has stepped up as a private citizen to contribute to our board, and she's made a wonderful positive difference. And the last couple of things I want to mention, we're aware of the provincial initiative for all municipalities to provide door-to-door accessible transportation, and we'd like to be part of that initiative. And we're also aware of Council's initiative to work with the town of Bridgewater for providing what we understand to be a fixed route option for residents of communities surrounding Bridgewater. So we'd like to stand by to look for ways to complement that service. In any case, it's time for me now to turn down the person who actually makes things happen between our operation and our residents. And so I turn things over to Darren Lance.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks again for everybody for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. Is it possible to get the presentation up?
Sorry, Darren, my understanding was that you would be sharing your screen.
Oh, okay, I can do that. Share. Well, somebody needs to allow me to do that. My share button is grayed out.
Did that work?
Yep. Everybody see that?
I can,
Cool.
but I've seen it before.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna run through, it's just a few slides to highlight, and then Eric has touched on some of the points that I'll cover here. We're operating 5 vehicles. We have 6, but we operate 5 vehicles on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. We take a 1-hour lunch break and then kick back in at 1 p.m. and run to 5 p.m. Those are a little bit of a in flux a little bit depending on what our clients' needs are. We can work around them a little bit within those times frames, and especially for medical appointments, we'll bend the rules a little bit. Our fleet, as Eric mentioned, we have 4 passenger Toyota RAV4, which we just added in December, and basically sold our 8 passenger bus, which had a 10-cylinder engine in it and was a very gas thirsty vehicle. Plus it was starting to have some mechanical issues that it was going to start costing us a fair bit of money. So we decided to get rid of it while it still had some value. We got a provincial grant to help cover 80% of the cost, and we had some private donations and obviously some money that we threw in from the sale of our vehicle. We have a 7-passenger minivan, which Municipality District of Lunenburg provided for us at the beginning of our transition. And then we have the ProMaster vans, which are all wheelchair accessible. As Eric mentioned, we're covering all of the Municipality District of Lunenburg, including the 3 towns of Bridgewater, Mahone Bay, and Lunenburg. Our current staff, so we're looking at doing a reorganization. So in April, the hope is to I'd be moving up to an executive director position, which will reduce my hours a little bit. And then we'll be continuing with a full-time dispatcher. And we are currently looking for a business admin person, which would be a full-time person, which I'd basically be offloading some of my administrative duties to that person. It is proving difficult to find somebody in that discipline, but we're still have the feelers out to try and find a person that it's a big position. It has a lot of different facets to it, and because that person also needs to fill in for the dispatcher during vacations and things like that. So it's a big ask for what we're offering, but we'll continue to put our searches out and find the right person for us. So we currently are running with 3 full-time drivers, excuse me, 2 part-time drivers and 9 casual drivers. And we have dropped down to 0 volunteers. Many of our volunteers have aged out, and some of them have transitioned to paid drivers. And it's getting more and more difficult to attract a volunteer person for many reasons. I think a lot of organizations are feeling the same crunch. So our ridership, so we peaked in August, which we usually do. March, obviously our December, January number and February numbers are usually fairly low, obviously because of snow days, and elderly people generally tend to stay inside when the weather's cold and snowy. So our ridership tends to drop off a little bit in those months, and it starts to pick up again in March and peaks in the summertime. But our average riders per day of operations is staying fairly consistent at about 55, 60, something. And I did this slide up just to offer a picture of what our ridership is doing overall year to year. So obviously in 2022, 2023, when we first started the transition and we were just expanding into the whole region, you can see that it's been consistent growth. over the time span, and the projected ridership for 25-26 year, which is higher again for all areas, which is very good news for the service. And in one respect, another respect, at some point we're going to reach the limits of our capacity, and we'll need to look at additional funding to put that sixth vehicle on the road. So where are people going? So I did some numbers up. So basically, shopping, errands, access to food is about 29% of our rides. Work is 16.7, and work is something that we've seen increasing over time. More and more people are using us to get back and forth to their work, which is one of the main reasons why we would like to be able to extend our hours. So we're able to, a lot of times we're either able to take a person to work or bring them home from work, but in many cases we're not allowed, we're unable to do both simply because of the way our hours are. And then there's medical appointments, which is 15.7%, which is a good chunk as well. So what's new? Again, as Eric mentioned, we went through a strategic planning process. So we completed our expansion, our complete expansion plan 6 months to a year early. And the board was looking for, okay, so we're here, what do we do next? So that's kind of what we went through with the strategic plan process. And as Eric mentioned, we are very interested in expanding our hours, extending to weekend coverage, and offering trips outside our region to hospital facilities that are not in our current service area. As mentioned, we sold our 2019 8-passenger bus, bought a new vehicle. Mentioned the restructuring, so we're doing that. And as Eric mentioned, we're looking at funding opportunities that will allow us to expand our service hours, which is right now one of those initiatives is to switch from a nonprofit operating license, which is what we're operating in now, and switching to a commercial license, which will allow us to do some charter work for, we're getting a number of calls for people that need rides on weekends to do weddings and events like that. And currently we're unable to do that. So this will enable us to do some charter work, which hopefully would be on a more profitable level in order to help support our door-to-door service. There are some limiting factors with switching to a commercial vehicle license. So we're working through those with the 3 other municipalities. It brings an issue when you have a commercial vehicle license. That vehicle has to cross a municipal boundary on every trip. So that brings us into if we're operating within the town limits for a pickup and a drop off, it brings the taxi question into the picture. So we're just having to work with the different towns to get waivers. Modal currently doesn't have a taxi bylaw, so we're okay to operate as we are in that area. So working through that, and hopefully within the next month we'll have that all fixed up and ready to roll. So again, as Eric mentioned, we certainly appreciate the support that Municipality District of Lunenburg has given Lunenburg County Wheels. Without your support, we would not have 5 vehicles on the road. There's no question in our minds about that. The support that we're getting from you is definitely needed to maintain our operation at our current level. So again, thank you very much for your support. And it's very heartwarming to sit in my seat. I can hear what's going on with the dispatcher in the room next door to me, and the people that are calling, and the appreciation that they have for this service being here is, as I said, heartwarming. And in the end, it becomes, once it's here, and now that we're here, we're really an essential service. And we're seeing that with the future of the accessibility legislation that's potentially coming forward, and recognizing that, you know, people need to be able to get from point A to point B. And it's certainly when you're dealing with disabilities and people in wheelchairs, options are very, very limited, if not existent, other than us, other than health services. So it really is an essential service. And again, thank you very much for helping us support the communities and helping us connect people to their communities. So again, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Darren and Eric, very much. We'll open this up for questions, but I do want to thank you on behalf of council for the work of Lunenburg Wheels. There is a strong commitment from our council to public transportation. And we are working, as Eric said in the beginning, with the town of Bridgewater on how we can extend service to the communities of Wildville, Hubbville, and connect Osprey Village. That's the first step in this. But as we have also talked about the need to commit to the larger picture of how we commit to improve transportation connections throughout the district. And Lunenburg Wheels becomes a really intricate part of that, as it has all along. And as we expand our commitment to transportation over the next number of years, there will need to be ongoing relationships and conversations between all of us to ensure that our plans align and that we work in concert with each other to develop the best system that really capitalizes on the work that you have done and what we can do together with the town to extend this service and hopefully encourage other municipal units within the county to work together on what needs to happen for all the reasons that you've outlined, but particularly with the growth in our population. And we know that many younger folks choose not to have a car for reasons, either affordability or for environmental reasons. And public transit becomes a really important piece in their life here, as well as it does for our seniors. And you also mentioned the accessibility issue, and we know that our institutions that have housed many people are now in the process of settling people in community. And we need to make sure that we have a robust system of transportation for them, because most of them will not drive, and they need to be able to connect with family, with all of the supports that they need in the community. And this will continue to be a challenge if we don't have good public transportation. So thank you. And I will open this up for questions. And I think Councillor Moore was the first hand that I saw. And then we'll go to Councillor Smith and Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Eric, I apologize. I was not home the Thursday that you were at the New Germany Cafe. I was in Bridgewater and didn't get your message till I got home. But after this, maybe sometime give me a heads up the night before, and I'd love to meet you up there. My question is exactly about this area. Are you pleased with the ridership that you are getting from areas like this north of the 103, or would you like to see it? And I know increase would be, you need more vehicles and stuff. Would you like to see more increase, or are you happy right now with what's your ridership is in this area?
I'll field that question. I guess we always want to see more participation with our program. I guess the complication becomes capacity at the end of the day. So right now, I would say we're reasonably content with what we're getting from the New Germany area. We understand that it's a unique area, and they are very self-sufficient, self-supportive, and it takes some time to build up trust and build up the ability to prove that we're going to be here. We're here for the long haul. We're here to support them. But the reality of the situation is it takes a vehicle out of circulation for an hour every time we head up to
Right.
that area and beyond, obviously. So it's like I said, we always want to see our ridership increasing throughout the whole area, for all areas, but at some point it becomes a capacity constraint, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I have had a few comments from folks in the Parkdale Maplewood area that they find it difficult to book rides. And I think that the impression that they've been given is around that, the fact that they are such a distance away from Bridgewater. I guess, just to follow up on a question that Councillor Moore asked, what are the needs in terms of making sure that this that your service is able to serve those clients that are further out? Because when I hear someone say that they can't book for a medical appointment, even when they're trying to do it weeks out, it's, I will say it's just one person, but when the community hears about that one person, it tends to be something that is talked about. And some of our older seniors can be very, very isolated. Yeah. And rely on a service like this to get to their medical appointments. So yeah, if you could just comment on that, because I want to say I heartily support this service and building it out. So I would just like to know what we can do to get more service to some of the more remote areas.
By all means, and I hear it every day on the phone. They say I'm very connected to the calls that are coming in. There's very thin walls in our office, so I hear pretty much everything that's going on with the dispatcher. And we are, the reality of our capacity right now for rides is anybody that's coming in from any distance really is looking at a minimum of a week ahead, and sometimes that's not even enough. We book 1 month in advance. We open up the next month at around the 15th, whatever the first business day is after the 15th, and it's a flurry of calls. Obviously the 15th, 16th, 17th, the dispatcher is extremely busy booking up the month, and it, as much as we'd like to be able to give priority to medical appointments, it's almost impossible on a first come, first served basis. And yes, you're right. We do have to at times turn people away because we just don't have the ability in our schedule to take a vehicle out for an hour and or even a half an hour at times to do that run. What does it take? The bottom line is it takes money. We do have a 6th vehicle sitting in the yard, but it takes roughly $50,000 a year to put a driver in that seat for 5 days, and plus the maintenance and mileage on the vehicle. So, we'd love to be able to get to a position where we are able to accept 90% of the people that call in, but we're not there right now. And I say it all comes down to funding. It takes money to run vehicles.
Well, I'm going to jump in briefly if it's okay.
Yes, go
One thing
ahead.
Yeah, one thing that Darren and the board have wrestled with or come up with is finding ways to have more passengers per trip. And that's a very hard thing to arrange. But it's something we discuss, and counselors have an idea that be keen to hear it. Anyway, that's a observation I've had as a board member and a former driver.
Counselor Brooks.
Darren and Eric, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for the service that you guys do. And I really do think that it is essential service. I mean, you guys have been holding the line for a long time, and I do believe that the transit that we envision is going to grow out of what you men and women are doing daily. So I appreciate that. Darren, I was happy to hear you saying exploring some further avenues for chartering. I think that one of the, to the point about capacity and how do we reach other people, it's going to be money and it's going to be funding. And I would want to lend support to your investigation of other chartering opportunities. I think that there is a real need in our community for that, especially in the summer months. There are events, and in the fall that pick up. And I absolutely would want to see you folks who are licensed and capable of doing that work, doing it for another revenue stream that can help sustain the Lunenburg Transit into the future. So that's something that I would love to know as you're developing further, and what you need from us as council to try to be supportive of that, because I think it's a good avenue and something that should be explored as we go forward. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I just had, you made reference to the point of adding a sixth vehicle. And what level of growth do you anticipate before you actually have to add another vehicle?
At times, I'd say we're probably there. Certainly not every day. And obviously this time of year, it wouldn't be necessarily needed. But we do have, like, for example, our Wednesdays tend to be our busiest days. And there are times where we would have enough capacity or enough calls to put that sixth vehicle on the road. In the summertime, I mean, last summer we maxed out, I think it was a little over 1,500 rides in August. And that was pretty much maxing out our capacity at that point. So yeah, and so we're getting very close to needing to put that sixth vehicle on. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it would be a full-time sixth vehicle, but we certainly could use the overflow capacity of that sixth vehicle at times.
So is that likely in the coming year that you'll get there?
It probably will not be in our budget for this year. We don't know. I say I'm still ironing out some issues with the commercial vehicle license. Still, we're in the infancy of looking at charters and what that is, what that revenue stream is actually going to do for us. And it'll take some time to build that up. So I would say for the 26-27 budget, we aren't currently looking at putting a sixth vehicle in the mix. We're still struggling to balance a budget with the 5 vehicles. And with the provincial cutbacks, last year we were hoping to get a little bit of an increase in our operating budget from the province. That didn't happen. And all indications are that this year we certainly won't see any increase in that as well. And we're still, obviously, the news is the provincial government is cutting back, so we don't really even know the full impact of that. When we have to add vehicles, typically we go through a federal and a combination of federal and provincial funding to do those. Federal government tends to cover 80% and the provincial covers 20. I don't know if that funding is being affected with the cutbacks or not. It's too soon to tell. We do have a federal grant budget, federal grant application in to purchase 2 more vehicles. One would be to replace the Toyota minivan that we have. It's getting close and we'll be at over 200,000 kilometers on it very soon. With probably a hybrid type vehicle, which will give us some savings in our operating budget. And then the other vehicle would be, the long-term plan was to have that for trips outside our region for hospital visits and stuff, but that also would be available to do charter work and other types of revenue streams that we can come up with to try and bolster our input of revenue.
Any other questions from counselors? Okay, thank you. I want to thank you again for this. And we, as you have said, Lunenburg Wheels is a line item in our budget, and we will be, we've already seen the first draft of operating budget, and that will be approved by March 31st of this year. So you're in there for sure with the increase that you have requested. So stay tuned for the final decision around that budget item. So thank you very much, and we'll move on in our agenda. So we'll let you sign off, and we'll move to our next item. Again, our thanks.
And thank
Okay,
you for
thank
your
you.
thank you for
Bye.
your time. Right.
I think I did see that our next presenter is available. I'm presuming that. Someone can confirm that with me. The presentation wasn't scheduled till 10:15, but if Colin is available, we will move to that next and not keep him waiting. Colin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay. So at this point, we'll move to the item on our agenda, which is the housing market study that was produced by Turner Drake. And today we have Colin Rennie with us to make that presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Colin, and welcome you to our meeting.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. This camera said, yeah, no, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it, and appreciate you guys not having me truck down the 103 today. That probably wouldn't have been super fun. I think Reed might have been on this, but anyway, we'll just go with it. It's like I'll just hang on. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys, and at any point, if there's like a tech issue or the audio cuts out or something like that, just give me a shout, send a message through this Teams functionality and whatnot, and we can go from there. Yeah. Oh wait, I want to see the other one. Give me a second here.
Madam Chair, I was just brought to my attention that we had scheduled the presentation for 10:15. We'd also invited some council members from other municipalities to join us.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for the delay in bringing that to our attention.
Okay,
But it might be prudent for us to do that just so that folks don't log on and find they've missed it.
okay.
Very
My
sorry,
fault.
Colin.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I'll just get my stuff ready and queued up, and I'll stay on the
we'll-
call, and you guys give me
Yeah,
a shout
we'll-
when you're ready.
We'll excuse you for now and we'll bring you back at 10:15. So
Sounds
in
good.
light of that, we are going to move to 11.2, Administration Department. So Alex, you're going to bring forward just a little summary on the approval of amendments to policy 036, Fire and Emergency Services. This was discussed at Policy and Strategy meeting on February 17th, but maybe we could have the kind of the short version of what this is. And I'm going to ask Tina to share the screen on the motion that is related to this.
Yes, I'd be happy to give the quick summary. This is a project that we've been working on for quite some time. We've had extensive collaboration with the fire service, demonstrating a high level of cooperation and collaboration we have where we see improvements needed with the fire service. The fire departments are happy to work with us on those important changes. So these are amendments to our fire services registration policy. And what we've done is we've embedded a code of conduct for chief fire officers in the registration process. So it creates a standard for behavior that protects the reputation of the fire service in the event that you have a fire service officer who's a chief that is behaving in a way that damages the reputation of the department. So we did have a workshop to begin discussions with the fire service about the concept. We had several discussions about it, the draft forms of how the investigation process would work, and the content of the code were workshopped with the fire service and sent through our own Fire and Emergency Services Committee, and as well with the Lunenburg Regional Fire and Emergency Services Group. So they are supportive of the changes. It does establish a third-party independent review of concerns about behavior for chief officers with a small panel of the FESC reviewing reports from that investigator, and then council making a final determination. As you mentioned, council has given 7 days notice of their intention to amend this policy. So we're just looking for that final piece before the policy is put in place.
And thank you, Tina. Would someone of our council put the motion on the floor or online? Councillor Smith?
To Mayor Elspeth McLean-Weil and Council, I move that Municipal Council approve the proposed amendments to Policy 036, Fire and Emergency Services as presented.
And is there a seconder for the motion? A seconder for the motion? Councillor Burns.
Second.
Councillor Burns. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor, Councillor Smith? Or is that just your hand is still up from?
No.
No, you're voting? Okay. I'm just
No.
looking.
I had just wanted to make a comment before we voted.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that this policy comes at a great time, just to look at the entire policy 36 and some of the great processes that have been put in place over the years to support firefighters in the area. And like Mr. Demerick said, the good working relationship that we have with the fire departments. As part of the committee, I attended some of the workshops, and it was great to see how we all work together to come to these policies.
Is there any other comment on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. I can see everyone. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move then to 11.3, which is Recreation, Parks and Tourism. And we have 11.3.1, which is the purchase of Parasport wheelchairs. And is it Tissy Bolivar or Moira Fryer? That's Ms. Bolivar? It's you.
Yeah, it would
Okay,
be me. Thank you.
great.
We are looking for approval to purchase 6 Parasport wheelchairs for our Parasport programming. So a bit of background. We received a grant in 2024 from Sport Nova Scotia through their EDIA grant to purchase 6 Parasport wheelchairs as well as an enclosed trailer to offer Parasport programming throughout the municipality. So we successfully purchased that equipment and have been offering programming since then. We have 6 additional chairs on loan from Sport Nova Scotia. So that gives us a total of 12 chairs that we've been using for our programming. Now that our programming has been established, we did apply for additional funding through Sport Nova Scotia's EDIA grant to purchase 6 more chairs of our own. So it would give us a total of 12 of our own chairs. And we received funding for that. We received the grant in the amount of $39,666, which would cover the full cost of all 6 wheelchairs to purchase. So what if we were approved to purchase those chairs, then we would return the 6 chairs that we have on loan from Sport Nova Scotia. So it would leave us with 12 of our own chairs. So this purchase would be entirely through grant money through Sport Nova Scotia. So we're just looking for permission to go ahead through our purchasing policy to purchase those.
And we have the motion before us. If someone would make the motion and then we can have a discussion and any questions related to this. Would someone make the motion, please? Councillor Reinhardt?
Okay. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council approves the purchase of 6 Parasport wheelchairs funded entirely through a grant from Sport Nova Scotia, and I so move.
And a seconder for the motion, please. Seconded by Councillor Burns. Is there discussion or question on the motion? Just can you just outline how regularly they're used and how the program is set up to create obviously now a couple of teams, but there may be more than a couple of teams that are involved. Can you just give a little background on that, Tissy?
Sure. So each season we do a 4 to 5 week program in the town of Lunenburg in partnership with the town of Lunenburg at the community center. So it's a 4 to 5 week consecutive program that people sign up for and come and participate. So we usually have anywhere from 8 to 12 participants each session. Then in addition to that, each season we do at least 1 to 2 pop-up sessions at different communities. So in New Germany, we've done them at the high school or at the French school. And at Hebbville Academy to try and generate interest in the other communities as well. So we do an ongoing 4 to 5 week session and then a couple pop-ups each season.
Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion as tabled signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. We will move to 11.3.2, which is the Parks Evaluation Criteria Framework, and I am presuming that Trudy Payne will lead us in this.
You are correct. Thank you very much, Mayor, and good morning, Mayor and Council. So just to give a little bit of background, at the January 20th, 2026 Policy and Strategy Committee meeting, I did bring forth a Parks Evaluation Criteria Framework, which outlined 12 evaluation criteria for Council's consideration. The following were the proposed park evaluation criteria, which included safety, physical condition, including welcoming and safe space, that our parks were accessible, that we're providing positive user experiences, that they limit the environmental impact and improve sustainability from an environmental perspective, that they're adaptable, that that we are providing parks that provide equity to everyone, alignment with our strategic plans, such as our active transportation or our active living or our open space plan, that we demonstrate that we have community support and engagement, that we undertake our financial considerations when making investments in our parks, and that our parks are a reflection of our population and demographics. At that meeting, there was a lot of great discussion around the evaluation criteria framework, and staff were directed to bring back the framework with the 12 criteria as presented, without a weighted system, because that was discussed, and it was determined not to bring it back with a weighted system, to make changes to one of the park definitions, which was the park equity definition, and to include a few park descriptions, to include a page that included the park description or the purpose of each park, and to expand or add some prompt questions in the framework. So when the evaluation was being done, it would have a much more thorough assessment of the parks. So the following are what represents the changes, and included in your package was the framework, which included the purpose and description page, which we would undertake if this framework is adopted by council, to go and put those descriptions in. We do have a fairly good job of that already, and just by using our website and some of the descriptions we have in some of our other documents. So we feel that can be a pretty straightforward exercise to come up with the description and the park purpose. The definition of park equity has been changed to the following: the fair and just distribution of quality parks and green spaces to ensure all communities have access to parks. It is about providing the appropriate level of investment based on need, not simply giving everyone the same amount. It involves being respectful and sensitive of the cultural nature of our community, both historic and emerging. So in the report, you will note that I have the changes bolded so that you can clearly outline what has been changed. And in the framework itself, I've outlined the changes in red so that you could see what changes were made. So there was some discussion around the park equity definition, and the reflection is in that change is it involves being respectful and sensitive of the cultural nature of community, both historic and emerging. And I believe that was exactly the wording that the mayor used at that meeting after I listened to the recording. The accessible criterion in the framework, the following prompt questions were added. So we did have, do people know about the facility and what they can do there? What we've added, the level of access or difficulty. And so, for example, we would have to create this, but using an accessibility guide. So this was something that I believe Councillor Bell had referred to around, is it highly accessible? Is it medium? Is it not accessible at all? Is the park connected to good, accessible, active transportation routes? Again, this was raised around public transit, active transportation, or is it only accessible by vehicle? So these prompts were added into the framework. And is the park located a significant distance from the main roadways or active transportation and public transit routes? Again, trying to get at the accessibility from a travel perspective, whether that's active transportation or through a vehicle or public transit. So under the positive user experience, additional prompt was added as well. There was some discussion around this. We do have, does the park provide a diverse range of amenities and activities? And the comment was made that sometimes people go to some of our parks simply because they are a passive park. And it was directed to add if applicable, so that has been added. And we put in brackets to refer to the description of the purpose of the park so that we know that the purpose of the park is either passive or active, and we can do a much more better assessment using those prompt questions. So then the alignment with the strategic plan. So specifically under where we added under the open space strategic plan, we've added examples like, does it provide access to the water? So for example, in our open space strategic plan, that is one of the criteria that's outlined that we should be looking at property that does provide access to water. So we've put that specifically into the evaluation framework to prompt us. Does it connect with trails? And we added two other questions. Is the park or proposed park in the municipality? This was also discussed. And is the property being considered for a park on a public or a private road? Because this is something we often consider when we're looking particularly at acquiring land and developing it into a park. So under financial considerations, we added, has the park been identified in the 5-year capital plan? Because there was some discussion around that as well. So really, the purpose of today's discussion is, has staff reflected appropriately the changes that council wanted to see as directed at the Policy and Strategy Committee meeting on January 2026? And if not, we'll open the floor for discussion and we'll go back and make changes if needed. What is being proposed today is that based on the feedback that was received on January 20th, staff are recommending that council do adopt the park evaluation criteria and framework as presented. If, as a follow-up, if this motion is approved today, the intent of staff would be to take the evaluation criteria back, evaluate each park using this evaluation framework, and bring this information back to council in a timely fashion so that it will help inform more fully the 27-28 budget. You do have some alternatives to consider today. Is, again, you could make changes to the proposed park evaluation criteria framework and have staff come back, or you could make the decision not to adopt the park evaluation criteria. In conclusion, this was a direction of council, just lining up with some of our other strategies that we have done over the years, such as our open space strategic plan and our most recently our parks standards document. And it was felt that having an evaluation criteria would help guide council in decision making when they're looking at making investments in the current parks that we have in our system and any parks that we might add to our park system in the future. And that, I'll open the floor to any questions. I know that was a quick recap of the evaluation criteria.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you added the, if applicable, to those passive parks where we don't necessarily want everything to be there. That's sometimes the best part about our parks, is that they're all different and provide something different. So that was my one thing that came out of the last meeting. Glad to see that in there. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the work on this. I think it will help us to think through our decisions on parks in the future. I think one thing that I have brought up before is around past commitments made to communities around parks and investments and even money in reserve, maybe. I'm just wondering if that is reflected anywhere in this document, like under what heading would that be considered?
So where I, through the chair, through to you, where I had put that was under financial consideration, and I did go back and listen to the recording again to try to capture everything that councillors had spoke about, and that was really as it has been included in the 5-year capital plan. So again, having the 5-year capital plan doesn't necessarily mean that it's a commitment, because really when the commitment for financial dollars is each budget year, council approves a budget, and as we know, sometimes capital plans get changed based on priorities or based on needs of the day. So that's how I was trying to capture that. Has it been flagged in that 5-year capital plan?
I think that's one of the challenges as councils over the years have changed. View of how we develop parks and where parks need to be has changed as well. And I think that's a very, I personally, this would be my personal comment. I think it would be very, it would not be in our best interest for the future to be adding a line that said based on previous commitments, because I think that over the years, we've seen the challenges with this. And I think it makes it very difficult for future councils if we commit to do things and use that as one of our criteria. I think part of the reason for having the criteria is to base it on a wide range of considerations and not just something that was said in the past. One of the things that, while I'm waiting for other questions, people can raise their hands, but this I think is a wonderful, probably covers quite well an evaluation of the current parks we have. I just wonder about the level of comfort with evaluating we have 4 outstanding issues that were raised in our strategic planning around parks. Sherbrooke Lake is one of them, Pine Grove, Maliga Lake, and all of a sudden I can't remember the other one. But anyway, the 4, I know there's 4, that how we will use this to evaluate those parks or potential parks. Can you just comment on that, Trudy?
Yes, I think it was the last 5 criteria, if my memory serves me right, that could specifically be directed at looking at potential parks. So if we were looking at Sherbrooke Lake that's not developed, those last 5 criteria. And if you were developing a park that's new, you would want to also take into those other considerations. So I do agree with you, Mayor, that it's probably more applicable to parks that are currently in our system, but you could use those last 5 criteria to help prompt and look at whether you should be investing. So for example, like the demographics, this one that's coming top of mind is if we're having a community that's really growing and there's no parks in that area, that would be a criteria that, if we're doing our jobs appropriately, that we should be flagging that this, the population has really grown, there's no parks, we really maybe should be looking at that. And so the number 2 could be like around, how should the park be designed to make sure that it's reflecting that. So again, I do think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think those last 5 particular criteria, and I'd have to go back and take a look at them very quickly if you
it may be useful for all of us if that is somehow noted in this document, what criteria are most important in evaluating new development. And I think to separate it from our evaluation of our current parks. That's my own personal comment.
Yeah, and I had outlined that in the presentation on the 20th. Maybe we didn't make it clear enough in the grant, in the evaluation criteria. But again, going back to the last 5, it's like one of them would be alignment with strategic plans. So for example, we do have the open space strategic plan. So does it, acquiring a new park or developing a new park, does it align with that? Has there been community support and engagement to support a new park? What are our financial considerations? Can we afford a new park, even though it might align with our strategic plans and it might have community support? And again, does it reflect the population and demographics? And from a park equity perspective, is there a good distribution? And so, for example, when I think in January I had talked about, like in the Oakland area, there was no kind of conservation area or park at all. So it was that was identified when council decided to make the investment in the Oakland conservation area. So I can certainly flag that on the framework itself, that these last 5 are really crucial when assessing new park investments.
Councillor Oikle.
Yes, I'm just wondering, Trudy, if you could speak regarding how this criteria will affect the present plan that we have to have public opinion sessions regarding the Mark and the Wiles Lake Park.
Again, that would, I take my direction from council. The original intent with the Mark was to do some public consultation. The direction of council was to, if people can, I guess when we talk about commitments and changing capital budgets, right? There was, a projection of $10 million and that got changed to 4 million, assuming this budget when the capital plan is brought forth, but that was the direction that we've provided to plan for 4 million in the Mark. And it was identified at one of our meetings that because we knew we were replacing a new building and doing an accessible playground. Sorry, I have something ringing in the background. That we would not be doing public consultation, and that was raised at a council meeting. So that's the direction we have been taken. And with Wiles Lake, there still is the intent of doing public consultation.
Other questions? Okay. We do have a motion on this. I'll just ask Tina to bring it up on the screen. If someone would propose the motion on parks evaluation criteria. Councillor Burns?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council adopt the parks evaluation criteria and framework as presented, with all parks to be evaluated and a report submitted to council by the end of the second quarter of the 2026-2027 fiscal year.
And a seconder for the motion, seconded by Deputy Mayor Vino. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion indicate by raising their hands. And motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We will do one other item before we move to the presentation. I know we're getting a number of people that are joining us. I've seen them popping in. So we still have about 8 minutes. So we will move to Mayor Councillor Matters and issue brought forward by Councillor Oikel on evening council meetings. So I will turn it over to Councillor Oikel to present her concerns.
Yes, so I have brought forth the idea of returning again to daytime Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month meetings for a few reasons. One is that I have noticed throughout the year that we have not had any presenters at our council meeting in the evening. And I'm not sure why, but I'm thinking that it could be because it is not during business hours. I've also noticed that we do not have a lot of people coming to those meetings in the evening. In fact, we've had since the summer, I do believe, no one coming to those meetings other than, of course, the one that was in the community, which is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our regular Tuesday night meeting, council meeting, which we have normally had during the day, is now in the evening. And the reason that we were having it to have it in the evening was to give opportunity for residents to attend. And I'm just that no residents are attending. We're not having any community members doing, or organizations or businesses doing presentations. And I would really prefer to do a daytime meeting rather than an evening meeting. And so I just wanted to bring that to see what other people felt, as well as I don't know if there's an added cost that we can save by having it during the day because of staff time in the evening. So that's just why I brought it.
Thank you, Councillor Oikel. I will just comment on the presentation piece that you mentioned. When we started doing this in the evening, I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor Vino and then to Councillor Bell. But just to give background to this, we did agree in the planning of the meetings, the CAO and I, that we would try to avoid having evening meetings so that they didn't get too lengthy, but we offer in those discussions with presenters, if they want to present in the evening, if it's particularly a community group, that we will hear it. So there has been, from a staff point of view, direction given to try to keep presentations through the day, but it is offered to groups if they feel that it's more convenient for them to attend in the evening. We will make that available to them. So just so that you know that was a decision that we did make to manage the meetings and the evening meetings so that they wouldn't be too lengthy. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Oikle. I think it's always good to evaluate things after we've made some changes. And I do have a couple comments that I wanted to make. And when we began this council term, one of the reasons I proposed adding at least one evening meeting a month was to improve accessibility. Many residents work during the day, they commute, or they might have other daytime commitments that make attending a daytime meeting difficult. While attendance at our evening meetings has not been high, I would respectfully point out that attendance at daytime meetings is often similarly low. For me, this is not just about numbers, it's about access, transparency, and public trust. Offering a mix of meeting times demonstrates that we are recognizing the diverse schedules within our community and are making a genuine effort to remain open and approachable. Currently, 3 out of 4 of our meetings are held during the day. Maintaining one evening meeting still keeps the majority of our schedule in daytime hours, while offering at least one accessible option for those who need it. I believe this approach strikes a reasonable balance between operational efficiency and public accessibility. And for those reasons, I would support continuing with at least one evening meeting per month. Thank you.
Councillor Bell and then Councillor Hubley.
Thank you. It is always good to at least try options and optional times to try to be accommodating where necessary. I do find, though, that having staff present evenings sometimes doesn't give us access to everyone that we might want to have there if a question arises. We've seen cases where if a question can't be answered, it usually is 5 minutes later by someone contacting someone in the building. And from my point of view, we have tried evening meetings before in other council eras, and it never seemed to take off. I am more in favor of Councillor Oikle's concerns, and I prefer to have daytime meetings. That's not to say that if a group needs to talk with us in the evening that we won't make ourselves available. And of course, most of our engaged meetings are evenings when we do go out and try to find out different things like land planning or coastal protection. We've always made those in the evening. So I'm leaning towards Councillor Oikle's concern. Thank you.
Councillor Hubley and then Councillor Smith.
In the beginning, when Wendy and I, or Councillor Oikle and I discussed this, I was in favor of changing back. Since then, I've had a couple discussions that have mixed in with the fire study discussions, and I have been following Deputy Mayor Vino's post of the comments. And I agree, we need to stay accessible. We have to be available day and night to accommodate people's schedules. So I will be against this.
Councillor Smith, and then we're going to have just a quick show of hands on making this change, a proposed change. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I also appreciate, us having the chance to review this change, but I think if some of the most impactful evenings that we've had at council have been when people showed up in an evening council meeting and were there when we were discussing some pretty important things, and we're giving, we're participating in public input. And I would agree, it doesn't always happen that way, and sometimes there's no one in the gallery, but just knowing that some of those evenings have been quite busy in the public gallery and that we have engaged people, I think it's best to keep the option open. So thank you for the review. But I think we need to keep that evening option. And I'll say that that for myself, I'm not at my best in the evening. I prefer morning meetings, but the public good overrides this for me.
Councillor Reinhardt, and then we are going to just have a quick show of hands on this because we are at time for our next presentation.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to quickly add, I agree with Councillors Vino and Smith and Hubley. I'd like to keep the access there. But a further reason is because in a lot of my conversations in the community, I've learned that there are still a lot of people who don't know that we have an evening meeting. So I'm thinking, you know, we need to give it a little more time just to make sure that it's widely known in the community before reviewing it again. But I appreciate the chance to review it and talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And yes, Councillor Oikel, I think it is important that we do take time to reevaluate the decisions we've made and to consider what impact we've had. Personally, I think this continues to be an important piece of our willingness to be open, transparent, and accessible. And I support not changing it, but I appreciate that we've had the conversation. So if we could just have a quick show of hands for those that wish to change and eliminate our Tuesday evening meeting and return to a daytime meeting, if we could have a show of hands on that. Okay, and those that would like to maintain the Tuesday night meeting, a show of hands. So we have more in support of leaving the current structure of a Tuesday evening meeting. But again, thank you, Councillor Oikel, for bringing it forward for discussion. We will move now to, first of all, I would like to welcome all those who have joined our council meeting today to hear the report from Drake Turner on Turner Drake on the housing market situation in Lunenburg County. So I will turn it back to Colin to make the presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions. Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you. And sorry to interrupt. I just want to maybe, if just for the benefit of everyone, I could just give a quick introduction to Colin, since we've got so many different folks here joining us. Just a recap on this project. So Colin Rennie is with Turner Drake and Partners Limited out of Halifax. They completed a housing market survey and needs assessment on behalf of all the municipalities working together in Lunenburg County. Council will probably recall, we kind of brought this forward in November 2024, flagging it as an issue that some developers and nonprofits have run into data challenges in our area. And anecdotally, we knew some of the realities of the rental market in particular, but identified that CMHC in particular had not been collecting that. So we did work with our staff and municipal partners in Lunenburg County, and everyone came to an agreement to pursue this jointly. So the contract was awarded in March of 2025, and so Turner Drake completed the study throughout 2025, and so we're very pleased with the result of the work, and we have lots of different very, very valuable data about our housing market. And so Colin is here to present that, and in working towards this, because it was done jointly with all the municipalities. We try to come up with a way where we could have those folks come and present that in a way that would involve all of the partners in some fashion. We intended obviously to be in person today, but Colin's obviously available to be here virtually. And again, we have lots of people calling in from both on the staff side as well as councillors and mayors from the other municipalities. So maybe with that, I can turn it over to you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. And yeah, again, thanks all for having me. I was looking forward to making the trek down. Obviously, that's not on the agenda. But yeah, happy to come before you guys, give a little recap of what we did, give a little overview of the project. And before we get going, yeah, again, if there's tech issues or mic cuts out or something, just yell at me, give me a shout, something like that. We can fix that as we go. And then again, before we get going, if you have questions or there's a concept that you didn't quite get or something wasn't clear, please do just ask or follow up with Reed or myself afterwards or something. I mean, this is your guys' project. You guys paid for this, and I'd rather you guys got what you need out of it than are left hanging. Okay. And yeah, so we're gonna go through some of the kind of like overarching themes of our work, overarching kind of premise of our research. I'm gonna try to keep it higher level, more conceptual based, and like less of a granular focus on numbers and such, and more of like what the key takeaways are. And again, all your staff have all the details of the report, the methodology, how we did our research, what the results were and such. And then if you have questions, just ask at the end. We're happy to work through that stuff. And yeah, let's just get into it. So I'm with Turner Drake. We're out of Halifax. We're a commercial real estate consulting firm. We do a whole range of housing consulting, housing policy research, housing development research. We did all 50 of the 2023 province-wide housing needs reports. So there would have been one for each of the 5 jurisdictions in Lunenburg County. We also continually do a lot of housing market and commercial market survey and research work in urban, small town, and rural contexts. So we've got a whole host of experience on trying to quantify weird trends, granular issues, and such in different parts of the province, and not just limited to that urban HRM bubble. I want to thank a couple groups, a couple people that helped out with this project along the way. Reed was one of the main kind of drivers of this work, one of the key components of this work, or proponents, I should say. So just want to thank him for the guidance on the project. And then there are several other key staff members from the other 4 municipal bodies. There's a lot to list, but you guys were all super helpful, brought a whole host of great ideas to the table. And I just want to thank you guys for your input on this. It's also, from our perspective, really good to see kind of more of that interjurisdictional cooperation on the municipal front. It's not something we see in our work that often, honestly, and it's something that's lacking. So it was really great to see the work you guys can do together, and that's really, I think that's a good thing. And then also we did speak with a lot of property managers, building operators, landlords, industry stakeholders and such who shared anecdotes, confidential information, confidential data. And I just wanted to say we appreciate everybody that took the time to speak with us through this. So here's what we're going to cover through this. We're going to go through some of the background of this project, the context under which we took this research and why we did it. I'm not gonna focus too much on like granular stuff. I'm more gonna try to keep it centered around key themes, key takeaways, and not really get into the weeds. First part's a bit of the scope, context of the work. Second part is going to be an overview of the rental market research that we did and the rental market survey. We're going to go through what that was, how we did the work, and what the kind of like overarching findings of that research was. We're going to go through kind of a regional, like small, quick hit on a couple of the jurisdictions. And then we're going to talk about some of the bigger picture findings, bigger picture long-term trends, and then a little bit of the summation of the stakeholder outreach that we did. Before I did this presentation, it was requested that Model, Chester, and Mahone Bay's results be final or kind of focused on in the regional highlights. Bridgewater had their own presentation, and I didn't get a request from the town of Lunenburg. But if there's anybody on this call from Lunenburg that would like to talk about this or wants a couple quick snapshots at the end, let me know and I can bang through a couple points afterwards. So in terms of what we did, there are kind of, I'd say, three big ticket pieces to this. One, stakeholder consultations, and that wasn't public outreach. That was discussions with key industry stakeholders, developers, landlords, builders, non-market housing operators, project lenders, financiers, people that are involved in the real estate industry and kind of like the housing scene more broadly throughout rural and urban NS. We did a series of updates to certain metrics from the 2023 housing needs assessments for each of the 5 jurisdictions where it was feasible. And then the biggest part of this was the rental market survey and the compilation and calculation of the results. So all the key rental market information for the rural and small town places that didn't have that information before. And then as a supplement to that, we took the findings that we had and we really drilled down into some of the housing affordability and localized housing supply trends. Yeah. The impetus behind why we did this work is because, as Reed said, basically rural and small town NS don't have available and reliable rental market info in any kind of public capacity. Basically, that means that there's no real higher order metrics available for rental rates, vacancy rate, demand, market supply, those kind of key bigger picture metrics that the public sector needs for research and planning purposes, the private sector builders need so they can plan where they're going to build, how they're going to approach stuff, what kind of units they might want to bring online. Project funders and project lenders need this information. So traditional banks, CMHC, provincial funding programs and the like, they all need this information to validate whether or not a project could go ahead or whether or not there's sufficient demand to support a particular project in a particular area. When these places don't have this information available, or these groups don't have this information available, this can actually leave housing unbuilt and projects not pursued, because these project funders can't validate whether or not these projects are going to be viable. And a key part of it too is nonprofit and non-market groups often can't get funding from higher order lenders, mainly like CMHC, federal government and such, because they can't validate localized market conditions, localized market demand, affordability challenges and such. Information that is available usually isn't great, or it's not available at all. So if you're an affordable housing group and you're trying to get a project off the ground, you're going through those funding streams, it's really hard for you to substantiate not just why this project is needed, but the rental rates that you would be are needed to charge, or how the market looks and whatnot, because this information just isn't available for rural and small town NS. And CMHC, who is like the nationwide leader in market rental rates, that's like the industry standard. Their market reporting does not cover Lunenburg County at all. And our work was done to address this, and the information that you guys got out of this is accurate and highly reliable. Yeah. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. Now we're going to go through some of the findings and kind of how we did our work on the rental market survey. And just kind of as a primer, market surveys are a pretty standard exercise done in like appraisal and valuation and kind of real estate industries, where there's not a whole lot of information available about properties, market metrics, what demand looks like and such. It's basically a long form outreach process and a lot of research to building operators, project managers, such like that, to get information and try to quantify market data. Yeah, so we did this process. This is basically just outreach. You talk to people, you try to get info, you take this info, you standardize it, you use it to calculate results. CMHC does this on an annual basis for the residential rental side, so think apartments in qualifying areas. And us as a firm, we've been doing these processes both on the commercial and the residential side for over 20 years now. So in terms of what we did, was basically about 3.5 months worth of direct outreach to landlords, developers, property managers, and such throughout the county. Pretty much most of it was on the phone, via emails, and then we were also fortunate enough to be able to meet with several larger portfolio operators, a couple who are based in the HRM, and then a couple throughout the county as well. So we were able just to go and get information direct from the horse's mouth, as accurate and reliable as it is. And we're also, as a commercial real estate firm, we have a lot of data internally through regular consulting assignments that we do. So we were able to get access directly to lease rolls, expense statements, and such for buildings throughout the county. We built a pretty standardized data collection process before we started doing this work. We took a look at what CMHC uses for their data collection outreach and how they process that stuff internally. And we tried as best as possible to mimic and kind of replicate parts of that process where we could. And then we went out, we talked to people, and we got building level data for vacancy, rents, unit types for apartments and rental housing throughout the county. Then we took all that info and we broke it out and calculated regional and localized market metrics. First step in this was to set up an inventory of rental properties, because to do this, we needed to know what we were looking at. We first got a set of contact info from each of the 5 municipalities for buildings that they had ID'd through their own work. We standardized all that, combined it, flushed it out, and then we took other streams of information. So think like property data from the province, tax assessment records, information we had internally and such, put it all together and built out a kind of thorough set of contact info and buildings that we needed to target for the market survey to get information to do these calculations. We built like an outreach kind of plan and like a targeting plan, and then we went and started talking to people. And yeah, this worked about 3.5 months or so. The bulk of the outreach work was started late June, early July, and ran through kind of late September. Yeah, so in terms of what you guys got out of this, the countywide information that we provided is highly reliable, accurate, and reflects what's actually happening throughout the region. We ran a whole ton of calculations on like statistical processes to determine if the sample we gleaned was representative and such. It's all good. I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. It's in the report. Your staff have that. Happy to answer questions afterwards. We did try to emphasize where possible outreach to primary market buildings, and that refers to rental properties that have a minimum of 3 units. This is because when we did that outreach at the beginning to some of those industry stakeholders, lenders, developers, non-market groups, they wanted information for primary market properties, because those buildings better reflect higher order market trends and give you a better indication of what's actually reality in a particular area. That does get into a bit of a conflict though in some of the rural areas where there isn't a huge primary market base. So in those contexts, I think like rural Chester, rural parts of Model and such, we did do a fair amount of secondary market research and outreach where it was appropriate in order to substantiate that kind of the overarching trends and make sure everything was reflective. And then all the calculations, all the outputs that we have in the reports and everything we gave you, those followed all like standard statistical processes, like eliminated outliers, all that stuff. So everything you've got is reliable, to the point, and reflects what's actually happening. The countywide figures are, in our opinion, best relied upon for research, planning, development purposes and the like. The municipal level data for a couple of places is biased by a smaller sample size because there's just a smaller amount of information available. And in those instances, it's usually best, in our opinion, to illustrate kind of local nuances, more granular trends and such. But you guys can have full confidence, region-wide figures. And on that point, a lot of the research that we did, everything that we did pointed to the fact that these trends and these issues are pretty much experienced throughout the county. And it's not like one thing doesn't happen in another place. Everything's an integrated concept and an integrated problem when it comes to housing. So the regional figures do reflect what's going on pretty much everywhere. a lot of numbers on this slide, and I'm not going to talk about each and every single one, but just for transparency's sake, this is what our overarching coverage rates looked like in terms of our outreach. So the total number of primary market units, so again, buildings with a minimum of 3 units, we covered over 1,500 of those through our market survey in the county. And there's also a substantive number of secondary market units that we covered as well. That's not shown in this table. It is included in the final reports that you guys have, though. Our highest rate of coverage was in Bridgewater, which is the regional hub, of course, and has like basically the county's entire base of primary market rentals. We were also able to leverage some relationships that we have with pre-existing clients and such. So everything from Bridgewater, super representative. And then we had high coverage rates in both Model and Lunenburg, pretty substantive, like wide-reaching coverage of the primary market for those areas. We had slightly lower rates of coverage for Chester and Mahone Bay, but still just shy of 1 out of every 3 primary market units in those areas. Gives you a solid sample size, gives you a pretty robust data set, and is indicative of overarching themes and overarching trends in these areas. And on the whole, yeah, just shy of 65% of the county's primary market inventory covered by our survey. And all the calculations that we ran, and we compared it to CMHC's reporting standards and all that stuff, indicates that this data is super useful, reliable, accurate, and provides a fulsome coverage of the regional rental market. Yeah, we're going to get into some of the key conclusions from the rental market survey. Oh my gosh, I did it again. I'm sorry. First thing we're going to talk about is vacancy rates. And just if anybody doesn't know, vacancy rate, key metric when it comes to the evaluation of a market, key thing for lenders and builders to look at. This just refers to the ratio of buildings, or ratio of units, I should say, in an area that are vacant at that point in time. So things that are available for rent. Countywide vacancy, we clocked it at just north of 4.5%. That represented only 70 units total across the county when we did our survey. Key with that is if you exclude vacant units in new buildings and buildings that were just recently renovated and have come online, buildings that are like still going through their lease up period, all that stuff, that rate falls to just over 2%. So over half of the vacant units we recorded in our survey are in new builds. You cut those out, that vacancy rate falls almost or more than in 2. And that results in the fact that availability in market-based affordable housing and market-based affordable rentals is basically non-existent. There's a complete lack of mid-range options available on the board, and you guys have low vacancy, low availability, and high demand throughout the county, and that was common in every jurisdiction. Oh my gosh. Sweet. Anyway, on to rental rates. Yeah, so we do have information about rental, like specific rates for bedroom types, county or each jurisdiction and the county-wide. I don't have those in here right now. Happy to talk about that at the end. But one of the overarching themes we found during our research was there is a major split between what people are currently paying for rent and asking rates. So what a new tenant would be faced with if they tried to move or find a different unit. Basically, what people are able to charge and what people are able to recoup for a rental unit has accelerated to the point where most renters in an existing unit can't afford a comparable spot if they were to have to go to the open market. One factor behind that is that the higher achievable rental rates that have kind of come on scene over the last few years have validated costs required to renovate and reposition units at a higher price point in the market. So if somebody moves out and that's been like a lower priced, more affordable unit, and the operator of that building knows that they can spend a bit of money, reno it, and recoup their costs and long-term get a better premium on their unit, they're going to do it. And that's basically resulting in a lot of that affordable market-based housing kind of getting eroded over time. That combined with increased operating costs, maintenance, property taxes, utilities, you name it, whatever. Those two factors are slowly eroding that existing supply of market-based affordable rental housing. And then that results in quite limited choice and mobility for tenants and renters, because if you need to move or you want to move, there's not a whole lot available in your price range. Another theme, another key takeaway from our research, the rural areas and small towns lack a critical mass of like purpose-built apartments. There's not a whole lot available, and what that results in is low turnover in the stock that is available, because people in those buildings have nowhere else to go. The vast majority of the county's rental supply is in Bridgewater, and rural areas outside of that, the few buildings that there are, we found little to no vacancy at all in those buildings, and the operators of those properties all talked about how there's barely any tenant turnover, and if they had to put a unit online, they would fill it really quickly. Basically, writ large, outside of kind of that like more urbanized hub, there's not a whole lot available. Yeah. So rents have gone up. We don't have historical information, but you can look at provincial trends, and we talked to a whole lot of people through this process that substantiated that, and we're able to look at historical rent rolls, historical lease rolls and such that we had available to us internally. Rent rates have been going up countywide, pretty much across all property types and in each jurisdiction. So like in terms of what's driving that, you've got a combo of like low supply with increased demand from population increases and such, and an overarching low supply relative to that higher order demand. And then you have operating costs pushing up that floor as well. Rental operators, property managers, landlords, whatever, they need to charge a rate that keeps their buildings financially sustainable. The rents they charge are going to reflect the costs required for them to do so. Ergo, if operating costs go up, rents are going to go up. Price inflation, we all know that's been a major thing across the board. That is also playing out throughout the rental and housing markets. And then again, I touched on it earlier, but higher achievable rental rates, those validate costs for unit renovations or conversions. And basically, if you can recoup the costs required to reposition a unit you have at a higher price tier in the market, odds are you're going to do it. One thing we found through our research, bit of good news kind of on that demand crunch, supply crunch side. There is a kind of mild reprieve happening right now. Most of the people we talked to reported a bit of a cooling in the rental market over the past year. And that's driven by an influx of supply at the high end of the rental market, in conjunction with an overarching slowdown in provincial population growth. That doesn't mean that prices are falling or that they're going to fall. It just means that it might take somebody 2 weeks or a month to lease up a unit, not 2 days. And on that kind of influx of high-end supply at the high end of the rental range, new construction rental rates are probably unattainable, unfeasible for the income thresholds of a lot of rental tenure households. But despite this, there's still demand for this new rental stock, and there's demand for an expanded range of choice and options at the higher end of that of the rental market and the higher end of the rental price points. People want this stuff. And though it's not immediately affordable, of course, over the long run, new supply at the high end does relieve pressure on older stock and mid-range parts of the inventory. Obviously, it's not a silver bullet, of course, and it takes a long time for this kind of filter through effect to work, but there is evidence that that does come to fruition over time. Yeah, so I'm going to go through and talk briefly about some of the more kind of regionalized, localized points for Model, Chester, Mahone Bay. Again, didn't have a request from Town of Lunenburg for anything on this front, but happy to talk a bit about that after the presentation, or if you fire me off an email, happy to chat with you, whatever. We're not going to get too into the weeds here. There are some numbers on the board, but we're just going to talk about kind of like higher order concepts, higher order pictures. Yeah, so we're going to start here with Chester. Yeah, some of the key takeaways, Chester's rental market is pretty reliant upon secondary markets. So think like rental houses, flats above commercial spaces, those kind of units. There's really low availability throughout the district. Our survey only clocked 5 vacant units throughout the municipality, and 2 of those were in a single property. So there's not a whole lot going. If you want to find a place for rent, odds are demand for that is going to outstrip the supply. There's low affordability. So we did this for all the jurisdictions, but we took the most recent estimates for renter tenured household incomes, and then we applied those against what we found through our market survey for all the rental buildings in the county. And if you're a renter tenured, or if you're at the median point for renter tenured household incomes in Chester, there's not a whole lot of market-based supply that you can reasonably afford without going over what's considered affordable spending levels. The local data for Chester is biased a bit by small sample size. So like a few kind of small instances can have outsized impacts on the results. But the overarching themes and trends that we identified in our research into Chester does align fully with higher order regional results, lack of availability, high demand, and unattainable rental rates. And then we clocked the average rental rate for Chester at just over $900 a month, and the vacancy rate came in at 5%. Yeah, we'll talk briefly about Mahone Bay, similar format, couple bullet points, and we'll go to the next one. Yeah, Mahone Bay had the tightest vacancy rate we recorded. We didn't get a single vacant unit during our survey in Mahone Bay. Demand for rentals in Mahone Bay vastly outpaces the supply available. There's also a high reliance in Mahone Bay on the secondary rental market because there's just not a whole lot of supply at all in the primary market and in the rental market writ large. And then there's affordability, major affordability problems for renter households in Mahone Bay, slightly worse than Chester, but still consistent across the board. Most a bulk of renter households are going to really struggle to find a new unit or to rent anything in the county without going over affordable spending thresholds. Again, smaller sample size, so there is a bit of bias there, but quite consistent with regional trends. Average rent was just over $1,100 and vacancy rate was flat 0. Yeah, last of the regional pieces, we're going to talk a little bit, same type of format for model. Key thing with model is a couple newer, larger rental buildings do have a vastly outsized impact on the localized results. So the vacancy rate for model is just over 13%, quite higher than the regional norm, but this is driven almost entirely by a couple major expansions to supply that have yet to fully lease up, and we expect that this will normalize in due course over time. It's not a sign of reduced demand, it's just a sign that there was a really small existing supply that had a few major additions, and now there's a bunch of available units on the market. That's a good thing. Model also has a high reliance on the secondary market, being a quite large rural jurisdiction. There's also major affordability challenges in line with Mahone Bay and Chester. Average rent, we clocked that at just over $1,750 a month, and the vacancy rate at 13.61%. But again, those are a little bit biased by that smaller sample size, though that higher average rent point is indicative of the kind of higher costs associated with renting those newer buildings. Yeah. So we're almost through here. You guys can stop listening to me ramble soon enough. But we're going to talk a bit about kind of key takeaways, where this is going, what our research pointed to, and some of the bigger ticket, bigger picture issues. Yeah. Of course, affordability in each jurisdiction we looked at, especially on that renter household side, it's a major problem. There are low levels of affordability if you're a renter, and that results in like limited ability to move. If you want to move to the county, whatever, it's tough to find a place that you can reasonably fit into your household income. Construction costs, it's great to have new supply. Construction costs are going to make any new supply that comes online that's private sector led. It's going to make those projects really expensive for the end user. Again, we touched on it earlier, but that erosion of market supplied, market-based affordable housing units, that is a theme across the board in each of the jurisdictions. Higher achievable rents facilitate unit conversions, unit renovations, whatever, higher housing prices, higher construction costs, higher operating costs. Basically, the stuff that we were relying on the market to provide for that affordable market segment has been severely eroded and will gradually continue to get chipped away on. And just to clarify on that, we're talking only like private sector developments, private sector rentals. We're not talking about anything run by nonprofits, non-markets, publicly subsidized units. We're not talking about that in this context. It's just market-based, affordable housing units. Yeah, and again, low vacancy rates means that there's low availability. So there's not a whole lot if you need to or want to move. Yeah, in the rural areas, for a variety of reasons, and they're always going to have lower primary market buildings or lower stock in the primary market. So the secondary market acts as the de facto provider of rental housing. That's okay in a lot of instances, and that's to be expected. But long term, there are issues with relying on the secondary market to provide rental housing. It's harder to regulate this segment. These buildings can often be more costly to operate, more costly to maintain. Therefore, they're more costly to rent. Higher utility costs. A lot of them are older houses heated with oil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that leads to higher rental rates in the long run. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this last point in a bit, but some of the funding programs for like affordable housing or non-market housing development, they're often quite misaligned with local contexts and like rural and small town realities. These are often more targeted at bigger urban jurisdictions and integrate things that don't really exist in rural contexts. And all that means is that it's often harder to get for affordable housing groups or non-market groups or nonprofit or whatever you want to call them. It becomes harder for them to get their projects off the ground. Yeah, bigger picture as well. The private market can only be relied on to do so much. Additional like private sector led supply is sorely needed across the board. The flip side of that is that market-based housing has a price floor, and that's the cost that's required to keep a building, like to keep the lights on. So it's only really a partial solution to availability, affordability challenges, all that such. We need more market-based housing supply, but do bear in mind that that is only one part of the coin. It's also just unrealistic for us to expect the private sector to give housing at a discount relative to what they could get on the open market. That's just not feasible over the long run. And we certainly spoke to a variety of housing operators that tried to keep rental rates realistic and in line with like operating costs and such, but expecting that to be the norm over time is not going to work out. Private sector can also not deliver deeply affordable units at any type of scale without like major intervention, major assistance, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And so in terms of what can be done about all these issues, knowing kind of the environment within which municipalities operate, housing is a regional, it's a regional thing, especially throughout this county. It's really integrated. Our research looked into that. Our research proved that. All the themes and trends were evident in all the jurisdictions. So not considering like housing as in a vacuum, and we're working on these problems, considering the impacts in neighboring municipalities and considering what other municipalities are doing is huge. Even this project's a great example of not working just in a silo. if this research were to be done for just one municipality, you'd miss a lot of those really important trends and miss a lot of that important work. Yeah, tenants are going to follow apartment availability and affordability, and to a certain extent, homeowners are going to do that as well. So just bear in mind that, like on housing, a rising tide can lift all boats. And just like over the long term, like expect to plan for growth and the problems that come with that. It's not necessarily a bad thing that there's more households and more demand for housing, but there are issues that are going to come along with that. And on that front, one instance where municipalities can have a direct impact is intervention and support for non-market groups, nonprofit housing, whatever terminology you want to put on it. Municipalities can get directly involved in initiatives like the preservation of currently affordable housing, tax relief programs, project endorsement, advocacy work, even projects like this where you're helping out the non-market sector indirectly by giving them access to market information they need. All of that goes a long way. Yeah, so in terms of where this is all, or what our research showed in terms of where this is all going to go, in the near term, we expect that there's going to be a slowdown in demand as provincial population growth kind of levels off from those higher points over the last few years. And then in conjunction with new market supply coming online, we expect that there's going to be a bit of a stabilization, particularly at that upper end of the rental market. We are not saying that we expect prices are going to fall because of this. It just means that things might level off for a little bit. But over time, we do expect population growth to tick back up, and we expect that all 5 jurisdictions are going to see continued demand for rental units and high levels of demand for units that are below market price thresholds. There's going to be much more like a higher order level of construction is going to be required to produce the housing that is necessary, and that's countywide. And in particular, all jurisdictions are going to see a higher share of housing units on the rental side demanded than they were in the past. And we do expect that because of this, that imbalance between supply and demand is going to continue to allow those affordability challenges to be a reoccurring theme over time. And all jurisdictions are going to need a wider range of non-market housing. And non-market housing projects, initiatives, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a major theme in the housing market writ large. Yeah, so we're almost through here. We're going to talk just a bit on some of the key kind of higher order themes from our stakeholder research or stakeholder outreach that we did. All that's outlined in the reports. And I just want to say before we get through this, a lot of the stuff, we didn't kind of like dig deep into a lot of this, where unless it was like absolutely necessary. And this was basically told to us and we reviewed it and wrote it up as like part of the report, but it doesn't necessarily reflect like Turner Drake's professional opinion. And on that subject, one thing we did hear from a variety of groups, private sector and non-market, is that municipalities can be a great partner for projects and partner for development, but they can also be a major barrier for getting housing projects and housing developments off the ground. Municipal approval frameworks are obviously important and they do have a major role, and it's important that somebody's keeping the private market in check. But larger scale, lengthy approval processes, lengthy approval frameworks, all that can be a major challenge for non-market groups and smaller scale developers. Lengthy approval processes and long-running consultation, like public consultation phases, those are really complex and they can really delay project timelines. And they can also increase costs for development, and those costs are going to get passed on to the end user. And when these, in particular, public consultation phases go on for several years at a time, it makes it really difficult for people to kind of forecast market conditions. They're trying to look at what things are going to be 4 or 5 years out, 3 years out, whatever. That in itself can act as a deterrent to getting housing off the ground, because if it's not worth their time, people aren't going to pursue it, or they're going to go somewhere else. Yeah, one thing we came across speaking to a variety of groups was just like public opposition to higher density or rental projects. These increase costs because then you have to provide reasons for why this project's valid. You have to go through all these extra hoops and like layers upon layers and layers of public consultations or outreach and such to assuade people that, you know, building an apartment isn't the end of the world. That can limit supply and increase costs for the end user. And then if you're a non-market group and you don't really have that sophisticated internal capacity, and you're trying to navigate these regulatory environments where you have to assuade local opposition, odds are that project can't get off the ground. Yeah, and ultimately, if these frameworks deter development enough, either less gets built or these higher costs get passed on to the end users. Yeah, some of the kind of program barriers that non-market housing providers, housing builders, whatever, often experience. One big ticket theme that came out speaking to a couple groups is that, and some of the groups on the construction and lending side as well, is that projects that get public financing are usually beholden to all three tiers of government. And that leaves them and their projects extremely vulnerable to delays, policy agenda changes, funding changes, what have you. So if you're a non-market operator and you're trying to get a small scale or affordable housing project off the ground, you then have to go through 3 different orders of government and umpteen number of different bureaucratic hoops and umpteen number of delays while you wait for other people to follow up and get other ducks in a row and everything. And then that ends up with long-running project timelines for small scale or affordable housing projects. And in turn, because you need to contract out the building work to get these projects off the ground, the construction industry does recognize that non-market and affordable housing projects are usually high cost, low return, and really susceptible to delays because of all the added admin complexity of dealing with all 3 orders of government. That ends up an extra cost for the builder. So they charge those back to the non-market sector, who then charge them back or try to recoup the funding back from their project funders. So it's kind of like a delay cycle that ends up in extra costs for affordable housing. On top of that, the kind of local and regional capacity for some of these non-market groups is really limited, and it's hard for them to navigate all these funding streams and regulatory environments and such. And then getting back to that data gap issue and like why we did this project, a lack of accurate and like localized rental data results in a major funding gap or no funding at all for non-market builders and non-market projects. And then kind of some of the higher order, like actual barriers to private development that we flushed out through consultation with a few groups. And, you know, there's not like, we're not making any claims about this, but it's more so what was reported to us. Rural developments, quite challenging and quite expensive. And one driver of that is if they don't have municipal services like water and sewer or whatnot, drilling wells on the South Shore is quite challenging. You need to go really deep, the soil's really bad, and that alone can be prohibitively expensive, so they'll go to other places or they just won't build at all. Market rent data, not available or misleading. If they can't understand what they're going to be able to recoup for the project costs, then they're probably not going to build or they're going to go somewhere else. Higher construction costs are an issue, and they make building market-based affordable rentals basically unfeasible unless they get subsidies or incentives of some sort. And then in order for a new build unit to be competitive on the rental market in the region, basically you need to bring a unit online that's about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, and you need to be achieving a rental rate of anywhere from around 1,800 to north of 2,500 a month to make sure that you can keep the lights on in the building. All right, so I'm going to stop rambling now, and I'm sure you guys are all happy for that, but happy to answer any questions you guys might have or any nuances that didn't get addressed. And if I can't answer anything today, I'm happy to follow up with you guys at another time or pass info along to Reed or whatnot.
Thank you, Colin. And at this point, I would, we have a lot of people on this call. So we're going to open it up for counselors from Modal as well as the counselors and warden mayor that may be attending from other jurisdictions in the county to ask the questions. Staff will leave you aside. You'll have to deal with this maybe on a separate call, but we will open it for conversation with counselors and mayor wardens now. So are there questions? Counselor Smith.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll hold any kind of comments about the whole thing, but this is such a valuable document. But my questions, I have two questions, wondering if you could comment on short-term rentals. Were not really highlighted in the presentation. And I'm wondering if you could comment on, in the study, it looks like short-term rentals are dropping, but also that the potential long-term short-term rentals, long-term housing rentals, I'm not getting the language right there, is kind of holding firm. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that. And then the second thing I just wanted to ask is whether your study would have captured any use of secondary suites in the rural, well, in the whole county, I guess, and whether that was kind of like a serious rental market that is happening. Just partly in response to the provincial program that was going, because it did seem like maybe a viable option for creating some new housing, especially in the rural areas.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Smith. Can I just clarify that first part of it, what you wanted to hear on like short-term rentals versus long-term rentals?
Yeah, sorry, just in the short-term rentals, in the data, it kind of breaks out which short-term rentals could potentially be long-term rentals. I take it that they're whole, kind of whole home rentals as opposed to a room in somebody's house. If you don't have that data in front of you and you want to like follow up with me later, that would be fine. I just found it interesting the way it broke down and that we're not actually seeing a decrease in the number of short-term rentals that could be that are seen as potentially long-term rentals if they weren't being used in that way. But yeah, happy to follow up later if that's not in front of you.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you later just on that to save kind of the granularity of it. But yeah, they're just as a quick point on that, we did touch on it a bit in the report for context. And we followed like a process to research that information. That's pretty standard through like Stats Canada for approaching the analysis of short-term rentals. And yeah, we actually broke out like based on the information on the short-term rental, like the short-term rental properties, what is considered like a potential like actual full dwelling versus like, yeah, a basement in someone's house or whatnot that acts as like a seasonal rental. We can make that distinction, and we did make that distinction through the analysis. So that's actually something you can break out with the information that we had on short-term rentals. But either way, I'll drop you a line or go through Reed or whatnot to kind of touch base on some of the distinctions there. Second point there on secondary suites. So we didn't look into secondary suites kind of like on a specific basis, but we did get like part of the rental information that we have is there are a few secondary like suites or like basement accessory dwelling units and such like that in the report. So that would have gone into kind of those overall market metrics. We didn't comment on like the provincial programs and such, but one thing I've looked into them a bit. And some of those provincial programs for like accessory dwelling unit and like accessory dwelling unit subsidies or financing and such comes from like the rates that they expect you to charge back to be eligible for incentive under their programs. And some of those higher order provincial rental rates can be based on like higher order figures from CMHC, or maybe stuff out of the census that's not really as localized, not really as granular, and pretty out of date. And then also results in if you wanted to build a secondary unit and you want the incentives to do it, they require you to lease them back at a price threshold that's lower than what you actually might need to make the development viable.
Just on the point on short-term rentals, though, I think you did cite in the report that the short-term rental market was not impacting on the current situation related to rental cost and availability. Am I correct?
So we did comment on that a bit. I don't have the exact I could pull up the specifics, but I'll pull up the specifics and send them through to read afterwards with you.
Okay.
But our research has concluded in the past and a bit in this project too, that like short-term rentals themselves don't have like overarching impacts on like rental prices, but where they do play a role in like localized markets is in some of those more touristy areas, which of course you guys are well familiar with, and I'm not going to lecture you on that. But they do limit the availability of certainly long-term rentals in some of those more tourist-driven areas where people might say, well, I could rent my basement unit or my house out for 4 months, 3 months, what have you, and then convert it to a seasonal, like permanent dwelling type deal. So there is a bit of a push and pull challenge on those localized scales.
Yeah, and that's probably true in Lunenburg and Chester and Mahone Bay, as opposed to the municipality. I think there's a question from Mayor Myra.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that short-term rental thing. I can guarantee you that the town of Lunenburg's housing crisis is definitely impacted by short-term rentals. People are buying houses that were either rented, annually, or young family dwellings, and they're buying them and renting them for 4 months of the year in the summer, and they're making more than they would renting them yearly. They're basically making more in a week than they would per year. And I know the numbers of short-term rentals in your findings might have went down, but that's also because when they made it, you had to register. We've noticed in Lunenburg, just because the numbers have been cut in half, just means that half the people haven't really registered. So we're working with staff to try to really hammer down on those short-term rentals. But in Lunenburg, in the town, and I can guarantee you in the district that surrounds us, like Chastity's riding, is definitely affected by short-term rentals. I mean, down actually where Chastity lives in Blue Rocks and those areas, there's all kinds of homes that used to be family homes that are now purchased and rented for 3-4 months of the year. So that's definitely impacting. It's no different than supply and demand. When you build more housing, you lower the price. Well, if you make those available, hopefully the price becomes low. So I think that's something we have to all look at seriously, because it's all in the surrounding areas. It's not just in the town of Lunenburg and the town of Mahone Bay. It's everywhere. I mean, I know up country, there's all kinds of things that used to be camps that are now used in the summer for 4 months for short-term rentals. So again, it's definitely a business that has expanded in this area, and it's hurting our housing market.
Other questions?
I'll just note, Mr. Myra there. Yeah, you did have a note in the chat functionality there about you assume that there'd be a quick review for all jurisdictions. So I'll just give you a couple quick points on Lunenburg itself, and then if you have your office like follow up with us or follow up with Reed or whatnot, I'm happy to maybe even have a quick phone call or something to go a little bit deeper. But I've just pulled up Lunenburg's specific results here. pretty much conclusions for Lunenburg, low availability, high demand. And the rental market in Lunenburg basically has a kind of a split where there's a glut of, not a glut, but there's a concentration of options at the higher end of the market in like recently renovated buildings, kind of that secondary market homes that have been purchased, heritage spots that have been redone and such. And then more supply kind of at that lower price of the threshold, not supply enough to help demand issues, but or affordability issues, but basically Lunenburg's market is concentrated like that. Vacancy rate overall for Lunenburg, 3.97%. And 3.61%. And in the primary market, 3.97%. And then the rental rate we had for Lunenburg was $1,326 as your weighted average. Yeah, other than that, like low purpose-built supply. There's a little bit of kind of newer stock that has been coming online through some like recent renovations and buildings getting kind of repositioned and gutted and such. But overall, low supply relative to what's demanded out there. And in the purpose-built rental stock, so think like actual true blue apartment buildings, there's like critically low vacancy for those types of units.
Any other questions? I want
Thank
to,
you for that.
yeah, I want to, obviously, any of the other, any of the units can contact Reed and work through Colin to get further information. But I want to thank you, Colin, for this. And I think we're very happy to have this data available to all of us. These are big issues that are going to take enormous amounts of work to kind of address. And your point earlier on cooperating between all of us sets the bar for what really needs to happen in order to really affect the market. I loved the diagram that showed the movement of people from where they live to where they work. I thought that was a very useful kind of pictorial presentation of what actually happens and how people move in our community. So it really points to the need to work together. So thank you again for joining us, and to the other councillors, mayor, warden, and staff that have joined us. Thank you for being with us this morning. We're going to ask you to leave while we finish our meeting today. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
At this point, we will move to our staff report on planning and development, and Reed Shepherd will lead us to the residential rental market survey and housing needs assessment update. And this is really a follow-up to what was presented here today. So Reed, I turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. That's correct. So this report is just in reference to the study that we just heard from Turner Drake. There's a motion there that it's basically asking that council commit to future studies on the frequency that was recommended in the report, and that they continue to be done in collaboration with the other municipal units. So as I had mentioned in the introduction there, this work kind of was really initiated from the experience that several staff within our municipality have seen from both the non-market as well as the private sector in terms of the lack of data and running into some funding challenges, and in some cases, putting whole projects, stopping projects from proceeding because the economics didn't make sense. So we had various discussions with, folks who are working in this industry. And a lot of the recommendations were that this work is best done at a regional level because the market, the data is better at a regional level. Operators function at a regional level. Developers function at a regional level. Obviously, people move in and out of the jurisdictions within the county. So that was a key component of it. But basically, as part of recommendations that we had asked the consultant to do here was tell us what we're looking at, and now we have that information, and then tell us how often we should be collecting this in the future. So the recommendation in the report was looking at about every 2 years, and with that, it's trying to look at things over time, because as we know, the market has changed dramatically in the past 6 years, for sure. But a point in time becomes less and less valuable as data as time moves forward. And so it's great to have a baseline now, but I think just as important is the commitment to continuing to collect that information. It doesn't have to look exactly like it did this time. You know, you wouldn't necessarily have to always talk to stakeholders to the extent that they did here. But I think collecting that base level information is really the critical part about continuing to do it in the future. So that's just a bit of a, in terms of the recommendations around the specific motion for today. And obviously there's the budgeting process that occurs every year. But this getting a motion now would indicate council's kind of commitment, at least to continuing this work going forward. And it's something that we can start to plan for at the staff level, and then working with our regional partners as well, who I expect are going to be kind of pursuing similar types of motions or things like that to work kind of collaboratively in years to come.
Thank you for that introduction. If I could just ask Tina to put the motion in front of us, and then Councillor Bell, while she's doing that, you have raised your hand.
That was with regards to the motion there.
Okay, thank you.
I think it appears 11.1.1.
Yeah, yes. Would you like to make that motion?
Thank you. To Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council commit to future housing market studies with a frequency of every 2 years in accordance with the recommendations outlined in the 2025 Residential Housing Market Survey and Housing Needs Assessment Updates Report, prepared by Turner Drake and Partners Limited, and further, that the study continue to be done in collaboration with municipal partners in Lunenburg County for the purposes of data and cost sharing. I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion, please? Seconded by Councillor Hubley. Is there discussion on the motion? Councillor Smith.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Shepherd, if just as around the point about data collection, I didn't get a chance to ask this from Turner Drake especially, but just given our commitment around gender-based violence and the report from Be the Peace and noting that housing was a major component of the action that's needed. Do you feel that the data collection as is, provides the data that we need on that front? I think definitely some of the points that were made about, inability to move in this market are highly relevant. But do we need any more data going forward? Or do you think that more about who was reached out to in terms of stakeholders and that kind of outreach? Because I just didn't see any particular analysis in the report on that, but maybe the data is there and ready to be analyzed.
I guess what was provided there was really focused on what we had outlined in our request for proposals. And that was really focused on assisting the development community and non-market community in moving projects forward and supporting that. I think there's a bunch of other advantages that we're seeing now with that data. There's a bunch of different things we can do with it. So I think the main purpose was we can take this and make sure that we go to those communities and those, the development community, the non-market, make sure that they have access to it and tell them about it and make sure that we can assist them when it comes to their funding applications. But when it comes to those other kind of benefits and, things that we can do with that data, we didn't ask them necessarily to collect or analyze additional information, like statistical information about different groups. So you could really kind of dig into probably different segments of the population. So if it's, single parents, if it's, low income groups, if it's different, newcomers or different people from different backgrounds, that could all play into people's different housing needs as well. And certainly that's another piece of work that could be done. And the data is out there for sure. I know Colin's still with us here. I don't know if he may be able to add anything to how you could also look at that other piece.
Yeah, no, just first to echo what you said, we didn't look into like aspects like that specifically because the impetus for this project was on that market development side and on for like non-market housing build outs and projects and what they needed to get like on the data side, what they needed to get those things off the ground. But yeah, once you have this type of information, you can then use it to substantiate anecdotal concerns, issues raised by other groups. You can use it like for a whole host of planning and research purposes related to like housing writ large, which does long run help groups like you've mentioned. And then also like if non-market groups can use information like this to get any type of housing project off the ground or specific housing needs for specific groups or individuals, that's a net win overall, like on the long term. But we didn't drill into like those kind of niche, or sorry to boil it down to the term niche, but those kind of specific housing needs segments, for lack of a better term, because that wasn't the impetus for this particular research.
We have a motion on the floor. Did we get a seconder for that? I'm sorry. Oh, yes, Councillor Hubley. Yes. Is there any further discussion or questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. I think it is important information that we need to monitor, particularly when you see in Modal the number of new development in the Osprey Village and how that kind of skewed the results of for our district. Clearly that skewed it, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years in terms of its impact. Okay, we will move then to the LCLC update, which Councillor Hubley.
I have it. I gotta get it up here. Okay, the following are the highlights of the LCLC meeting held on February 19th, 2026. Andrew Tanner presented the 55+ Games Legacy Fund recommendations, which include the pickleball court, a bursary fund for future Lunenburg County participants, a branded water fill station at the LCLC, donations to HB Studio Turf, and a fund for 55+ Try It activities. A motion was passed to accept the recommendation of the 55+ Games Committee. The strategic plan was reviewed. We focused on 5 strategic pillars: governance, organizational excellence, EDIA, partnerships with health and wellness actions. This will be a 4-year strategic plan. We've given direction for a few more changes and hope to be able to accept the strategic plan at our next meeting. You can expect another update. The second draft of the donation and sponsorship request policy was reviewed. We're in the process of fine-tuning the policy and we'll review it again at the next LCLC meeting. I'm happy to report a motion was passed to accept the concession service policy.
We had an in-depth review of the 2026-2027 operating capital budgets. As Elena Wenzel will most likely touch on in her review, the municipal operating grants are slightly more than 2025-2026, but within our budgeted reserve. 2026-2027 operating grant is $988,000. The 2025-2026 operating grant was $958, a difference of $29,720. A motion was passed to accept the operating budget. The capital budget includes aquatic tile replacement, a much needed compressor for the arena, as we are operating on one and should be operating on two, a play pool pump replacement, a therapy pool filter, parking lot upgrades, video surveillance upgrades, and IT equipment. A motion was passed to accept the capital budget not to exceed $911,000 less grants in any residual. Although the update is short, the meeting was not. That concludes my report.
No, it wasn't a short meeting.
No.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Hubley, who's also the chair of that committee? Does a good job there for us. We will move then to the Deputy Mayor's report. Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. It'll be short. There was no public events since our last meeting that I attended. So just participating in agenda briefings and check signings and then committee meetings as assigned. Thank you.
Any questions? My report involves a number of things. So together with Tom McEwen, we participated in a roundtable discussion on the economy of our area hosted by Dalhousie University. The morning session included municipal leaders, business owners, and executives, as well as government staff working in the field of economic development. This was the second year for Dalhousie to reach out to rural communities to build and enhance relationships and seek ways to connect with opportunities outside of the Halifax area for students and researchers. And it was an interesting discussion just to have the group assembled and have a conversation about the economy of the community. I participated in the Fire Service Governance online meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and his staff reporting on the plans of the government to revise legislation governing fire services throughout the province and the implications of the direction proposed in the legislation. Since then, as a municipality, we have made an effort to connect directly with our community fire departments and regional fire committee to discuss the proposal. Thank you to all of you as councillors who have organized conversations and attended meetings on this matter. As you all know, this has very serious implications for us as a municipality, as it would see the fire service transition to a municipally led service rather than a community-based one. We will continue to work with our fire departments and with the provincial government to find the best way forward. And as of yesterday, the legislation, I've asked Tom, and he thinks it's the second reading for the legislation that was tabled last fall. But we will continue to work on this over the next number of weeks. I participated in a Zoom call with the local community health board directed to elected municipal representatives outlining their work. I provided feedback on a number of projects we are working on, including public transportation and housing, that aligned with their concerns and priorities as a community health board. I had good visits with a number of residents at the New Germany Cafe and the Riverport Breakfast. I find both of these events are great opportunities to visit and hear what is of concern to residents. I attended an African Heritage Month event hosted by the Multicultural Association at the Des Brisets Museum in Bridgewater. The event highlighted the 10 African nations that are now represented in the population of the town of Bridgewater. And these include Cameroon, Sudan, Tanzania, Nigeria, Kenya, Liberia, Ghana, and the Republic of Congo and Monrovia. It was a beautiful event which included music, storytelling, poetry, lots of kids participating, and a very colorful fashion show featuring the tribal costumes of the countries that were represented in the room. The event ended with a feast of traditional foods representing the different countries. Finally, I took part in a Zoom call that addressed the issue of integrating climate decision-making in council processes. This was much more relevant for cities and large towns that featured the work being done in Halifax, who has now, and I had forgotten this, but it now has a 3% climate action tax built into their property tax rate. And the other representative that spoke was St. John's, Newfoundland. So that concludes my report. At this point, we will move in camera. And, oh, Councillor Smith, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that it wasn't a second reading, that the legislation that came forward yesterday on fire services, it's a whole new act. So the one that was tabled last year, in September was a first reading that promised a regulatory framework. So I think that's what we got yesterday, but maybe Tom could speak to that.
Yeah, Tom, you had your hand up, Tom.
Yes, so actually the Bill 158 was introduced for second reading. It had first reading on October 25th, 2025. And then they introduced companion legislation for first reading, and that's the Support for Fire Protection Services Act. So they've advanced now a second piece of legislation that will move through I assume, move through the legislature, which is it's a bit longer, but it still has the focus of the fire services review. And this one includes a reference to the fire commissioner and the position of the fire commissioner. So the two pieces of legislation are going to work together, one setting up a framework and then one setting up an act to provide support for fire protection services. So I just have to take a little more time to review the second one, so I'm not as familiar with that one.
Thank you for that. We need a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Deputy Mayor Vino. All those in favor, raise your hands. Motion is carried unanimously. We will move in camera. I'm not sure what
we
Tina,
have 2 minutes.
I'm taking direction from you.
Can we have 2 minutes?
Yes, you
Okay.
can.